The sky over the barren moon was always dark and red, like a storm waiting to fall. Dust storms moved across the land like crawling beasts, hiding everything in their path. Jonah wiped sweat from his brow as he adjusted the old radio panel in his workshop. His small outpost stood alone in the wasteland. Surrounded by scrap and silence, he was a mechanic, not a hero. Just a man who fixed things others had forgotten. But today, the signal changed everything. A distress call came through. The static cracking, broken, full of panic. Mayday, ... Unknown damage, ... Losing altitude. System failure, ... Please, ... Help. Then silence. Jonah froze. Eyes narrowing, he checked the coordinate South Ridge. Less than 30 clicks away. Most would ignore it, especially out here. But Jonah grabbed his toolkit and jumped into his old rover. The engine growled to life. Shaking dust from its cracked panels, he drove fast, wheels kicking up red sand as the storm began to rise behind him. It didn't take long to find the crash. The alien ship had torn through the rock and slammed into the canyon wall. Smoke rose. From the wreck, black against the sky, flames licked the metal, and twisted parts sparkled like broken stars. Jonah parked his rover and ran, covering his mouth with a cloth as the wind howled. Inside the wreck, bodies lay twisted and burned. Most were beyond saving, already gone. He searched fast, heart pounding, eyes sharp. Then, in the back, he saw movement, a faint sound, a cough. He rushed forward and found her, an alien girl, young, her skin pale blue with glowing markings. Her arms and legs gone, burned or torn away in the crash. Blood pooled beneath her, but her chest rose and fell. She was alive, barely. Jonah hesitated, then pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around her. She trembled, eyelids fluttering, lips cracked and dry. No, she whispered in a strange accent, trying to pull away. I'm not here to hurt you, Jonah said softly, even though he knew she couldn't understand. He lifted her gently, cradling her broken body, like fragile glass. She was lighter than he expected. To light, she had lost too much blood. Too much time. He carried her back to the rover, shielding her from the burning wind. The outpost wasn't far, but every minute felt like hours. Her breathing was weak, her head falling against his chest. Hold on, he whispered. Just hold on. Back at the outpost, he laid her on the medical cot. His supplies were old but clean, meant for machines, not living beings. Still, he did what he could, sealed the wounds, gave her oxygen, injected pain relievers. She groaned in her sleep, twitching as if caught in a nightmare. Jonah stayed by her side through the night, wiping sweat from her forehead and changing bandages. At one point, her eyes opened for a second. Glowing softly in the dark, they looked at him with fear, confusion, and something else, hope, maybe. Then they closed again. Jonah leaned back, exhausted. He had seen many things in the wasteland, but never this. Never someone who had lost everything and still clung to life. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or why her ship fell from the sky. But he knew one thing. He wouldn't let her die. Outside, the storm howled louder, as if angry that it had failed to bury her. Jonah stood at the doorway, staring out into the dark. He whispered to himself, she's not going to die out here. Not while he was still breathing. The alien girl woke with a gasp, her body jerking in the bed. She couldn't feel her limbs, only the cold metal table beneath her and the strange pressure in her chest. The room was dim, filled with blinking lights and humming machines. She didn't know where she was, didn't recognize the sound of the air or the smell of oil and metal around her. Her vision blurred, but then she saw him, a human, sitting across from her. He looked tired, eyes red, hands stained with grease. He didn't move when she looked at him, just nodded slowly. You're safe, he said. Voice low and calm. She didn't understand his words, not all of them, but the tone was soft. Not a threat, not a trap. Her breath came in short gasps as she tried to move, but her body wouldn't respond. She looked down and let out a sharp, broken cry. Her arms, her legs gone, tears filled her eyes as panic hit her chest like a crashing wave. The human quickly moved closer, hands up, trying to calm her. No, it's okay. Don't panic. You're safe here, he said again. She turned her head away, tears rolling down her cheek. She had always feared this. Her teachers said humans were dangerous, that if they caught you, they'd tear you apart. Now she was in a human place, and her limbs were missing. It felt like a nightmare, but then, why was she still alive? Why wasn't he hurting her? The man left the room for a moment, then came back with a spoon and a small bowl of thick, warm soup. He held it close, dipped the spoon in, and gently brought it to her lips. She flinched at first, then opened her mouth slowly, tasting it. It was bland, but warm. She swallowed, and something inside her chest relaxed just a little. He fed her slowly, waiting after each bite. When the bowl was empty, he smiled softly and cleaned her lips with a cloth. Name, he said, pointing to his chest, Jonah. Then he pointed to her. You? She hesitated, voice dry and shaking. Selah, he repeated gently. Nodding, she blinked. Surprised, she hadn't expected him to say it right. His accent was strange. But he tried. Every day after that, he came back, sometimes. He spoke to her, even if she didn't understand. Other times, he just sat nearby while she rested. He gave her water, food, and adjusted the bandages that covered her stumps. It was painful, but he worked carefully, his hands always gentle. Selah. Started learning small words from him. He pointed at things, said their names, and waited for her to repeat, light, tool, bed. She didn't know why she was trying, but it helped pass the time, and it made the silence less heavy. One day, Jonah entered carrying something strange in his arms. It was a set of mechanical parts, arms and legs, but made from old droid pieces, rough and scratched, but shaped with care. He placed them on the table beside her. Watching her reaction, Selah stared at them. Then at him, eyes wide. He pointed, then to her, then made a motion with his hands. It took her a second, but she understood. He wanted to give her limbs again. Her lips parted, breath catching in her throat. No one in her crew would have done this. They would have left her, considered her useless. But this human, this mechanic from the wasteland, he was building her new arms, new legs. Jonah spent hours in the other room, welding, shaping, adjusting. Selah listened to the sounds, the sparks, the whir of tools. Sometimes he cursed when a part didn't fit, but he never gave up. And at night, he returned with updates, showing her the progress. She couldn't stop herself from watching him, his face always calm, focused. She started to trust him, little by little, not because of what he said, but because of what he did. He didn't treat her like a prisoner or an enemy. He treated her like someone who mattered. One evening, as the red light of the setting sun fell through the dusty window, Jonah rolled in a metal chair with the first mechanical arm ready to be attached. He gave her a look, waiting for permission. Selah nodded slowly, her throat dry. He worked carefully, hands steady as he locked the limb into place. It stung, but not too much. When it was over, she raised the arm, watching the fingers move. For the first time since the crash, Selah smiled. It was small and weak, but it was real. Jonah grinned and leaned back, wiping his forehead. Not bad for scrap, he said proudly. Selah looked at the arm again, then at Jonah. A single thought echoed in her mind. Maybe humans weren't monsters after all. The morning light was soft and golden as it slipped through the dusty windows of the outpost. Jonah was already up, tightening bolts and checking wires while soft music played from a rusted speaker. Selah sat quietly near the workbench, the new arm attached to her shoulder, moving slowly with each breath. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. For someone who had lost everything, it felt like a miracle. Jonah glanced over his shoulder, smiled, then pointed at a long metal bar. "Try to grab it," he said, speaking slowly. Selah looked down at her mechanical hand, then reached out. The fingers trembled, gears whining softly, but she touched the bar. Then, after 2 tries, she grabbed it. Her eyes lit up. Jonah clapped once, grinning. "See? Told you it'd work." They kept practicing. Jonah added small weights, different objects, tools, cups, wires. Selah focused hard, her face serious, every time she succeeded. Jonah nodded with approval. Every time she failed, he simply said, "Try again." By the 3rd day, she could hold a wrench steady. By the 5th, she was helping him repair an old cleaning bot. She laughed when it shocked him by mistake, a sound neither of them expected. Jonah rubbed his hand, pretending to be angry. "You programmed it to attack me, didn't you?" he teased. Selah shook her head, still laughing. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying red dust through the empty rocks. Jonah paused as he looked at the horizon, his smile fading a little. Something had been bothering him since the crash. The damage to Selah's ship looked strange, not like an accident. More like something had hit it from the inside. He hadn't told her yet, didn't want to scare her. But the thought followed him like a shadow that evening. He powered up the old satellite dish and tried to check recent broadcasts. Selah sat beside him, watching the screen. Jonah scrolled through static, then suddenly stopped. A coded message blinked on the screen, bouncing between hidden channels. He adjusted the frequency, narrowed the signal. A voice came through, harsh, clipped, full of static. "Target crashed. Last known coordinates. Eliminate if alive." Jonah stared at the screen, heart sinking. He looked at Selah. She had gone pale. Even if she didn't understand the language, she knew what it meant. Someone was still hunting her. Jonah stood up and locked the doors. He checked the sensors and sealed the windows. Selah didn't speak, just sat there, silent, eyes distant. She remembered the last moments before the crash. Her crew had argued. One shouted something she hadn't understood. Then the explosion from behind one of their own weapons triggered inside. It hadn't been a system failure. Someone had tried to silence her. Now she knew why. She had data hidden inside her gear, something her people weren't supposed to share. Something powerful, maybe dangerous. And whoever had sent the kill order didn't care if she was broken or helpless. They just wanted her gone. Jonah brought over a bag filled with supplies, wires, welding tools, energy cells. "We're going to finish your legs next," he said quietly. "If they come, you'll need to run or fight." Selah nodded slowly, no longer afraid, not because the danger was gone, but because she wasn't alone anymore. She watched him work into the night, his hands steady, face lit by blue sparks as he shaped metal into new limbs. Not perfect, not beautiful, but strong, made with care, made for her. As she looked at the pieces coming together, her heart ached in a strange way, not from pain, but from something softer. No one had ever done this for her before, not even her own kind. This human, covered in dust and grease, was giving her back more than movement. He was giving her freedom later. When the first leg was attached, Jonah gently helped her stand. Her body shook, unbalanced. He held her up, guiding her one step forward, then another, and another. Selah looked up at him, her voice quiet but clear. "Thank you," Jonah blinked, then gave her a small smile. "You're welcome." Selah. Outside in the cold wind, something beeped on the outer sensors. Jonah turned toward the sound, expression hardening. They both knew it was only a matter of time now. but at least she could stand. Jonah stood frozen near the old sensor console. The outer perimeter alarm was flashing red, slow and steady like a heartbeat. It wasn't wind this time, and it wasn't wildlife. Something or someone had entered the canyon. He grabbed his old plasma torch and slipped it into the holster by his leg. Then he turned to Selah, who was sitting at the edge of the workbench. Her new legs halfway attached. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp, focused. He didn't need to explain. She already knew. "They found us," she whispered, voice low. Jonah nodded and crossed the room, pulling out a dusty crate marked emergency. Inside were 3 stun grenades, 2 plasma batteries, and a cracked scout drone. He tossed the grenades onto the table, then pointed to the back of the outpost. "There's a tunnel exit that leads to the ridge," he said. "If something goes wrong, use it." Selah didn't respond. She reached for a small welding tool and started connecting the second limb herself. Jonah paused. Watching her, she didn't look afraid. Not anymore. He let her work while he activated the drone and sent it flying through the vent system. It buzzed outside like a slow insect, scanning the canyon. The drone's screen flickered, and then showed movement 3 figures, not human, black armor, long rifles, and slow, confident steps. They were hunting, not searching. Jonah leaned closer. Noticing the insignia on their chests, he didn't recognize the species. But the mark matched the signal he intercepted earlier. These weren't soldiers. They were executioners. Selah stood behind him, both legs now locked into place. Her movements were slow but steady, every step smoother than the last. Jonah handed her one of the stun grenades. "You sure about this?" he asked. She looked at him and said, "I'm not hiding." They set traps around the entrance, old tech repurposed as defense. One pressure plate linked to a flash mine, another to a sonic blast. Jonah climbed to the roof to set up an improvised turret. Below, Selah positioned herself behind a stack of metal panels. Watching the approach, the silence stretched 4 minutes. Then, suddenly movement. The first attacker came into view, his armor reflecting the canyon's red light. He stepped directly onto the trap, and the ground exploded in blinding light. Selah threw the stun grenade over the barrier, landing right in the second one's path. The blast knocked both off balance, and Jonah fired a warning shot from the roof. Blue sparks danced in the air as energy crackled off the walls, but they were fast. The third one jumped forward, aiming directly at Jonah. A plasma bolt missed him by inches, scorching the wall. Jonah ducked and yelled, "Selah, now!" She leaped from cover, her new legs pushing her forward with surprising speed. Her movements were rough, but the strength in them was real. She tackled the second attacker mid-step, knocking him into the canyon wall. Jonah fired again, this time hitting the rifle out of the first attacker's hands. Selah rolled and came to her knees, picking up the enemy weapon. Her arms shook, but she aimed true. 2 quick bursts of energy lit the canyon. One attacker fell, the other crawled back, leaving behind sparks and smoke. Jonah climbed down fast, panting. He looked around, heart racing. It was over. For now, 3 attackers down, their ship disabled. Smoke rising in the distance, Selah limped toward him, her body trembling from the strain. But she smiled, just a little. He ran to her side and caught her before she fell. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. Better than before, inside the outpost. Jonah checked the systems and scanned for more incoming signals. Nothing. They were alone again. Selah sat in silence, her hands resting on her knees. Then she turned to him and asked softly, "Why did you help me?" "You didn't have to." Jonah paused, looking at the burned marks on the floor, the broken gear, the blood on his hands. "I don't know," he said honestly. "Maybe because someone should." Selah stared at him for a long moment, then said something in her own language Jonah didn't understand, but her tone was soft. respectful, even grateful. She placed her hand gently on his. He didn't pull away. Outside, the wind began to calm. The storm fading into silence. But inside, something had changed. She wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was someone he'd fought for, and someone worth fighting with. The sun hadn't risen yet, but the sky outside the outpost glowed a soft orange. The battle was over, but the tension still hung in the air like smoke. Jonah sat at the edge of the repair table, wiping blood off his hands with an old towel. His shirt was torn, his arms covered in bruises, but his eyes were fixed on the figure sitting across from him. Selah was quiet, staring at her hand's metal fingers, smooth and newly polished. They didn't tremble now. She moved them slowly, with control, like she'd been born with them. The joints responded to every thought, every signal from her mind. But they weren't just machines anymore. They were hers. Jonah got up, grabbed a cup of water, and handed it to her. She took it, held it, and for the first time, drank without help. He didn't smile, didn't clap, didn't say anything. He just watched with quiet pride. She placed the cup down carefully and looked at him. "You fix me," she said softly. He shrugged. "I only helped you fix yourself." The silence between them was full, not empty, but peaceful. Outside, the desert wind whistled gently, carrying the scent of metal and dust. Inside, the lights flickered, and the soft hum of machinery filled the space. Jonah moved to the workbench, pulling apart some wires and reshaping a small tool in his hand. Selah stood slowly, adjusting her legs as she walked toward him. Her steps were no longer clumsy. Every motion was stronger, more sure. She watched him work, then reached out and grabbed a small scanner. He paused, surprised. She held it out. "I help," she said. He took a breath, then nodded. Together, they repaired one of the damaged drones, rewired the energy coil, replaced the lens. Hours passed, but neither of them noticed the quiet teamwork. The way they moved around each other, it felt easy now. When the drone blinked to life, Selah let out a soft laugh. Jonah smiled without looking at her. "You're a fast learner," he said. "Good teacher." She replied. That evening, they sat outside the outpost on a small crate near the edge of the canyon. The stars above were brighter now that the storm had passed. Selah leaned back and looked up, her eyes glowing slightly under the night sky. "I never looked at stars like this before," she said. Jonah raised an eyebrow. "Your people don't stargaze." She shook her head slowly. "We look forward, not up." Jonah looked at her for a long time before answering, "Well, maybe that's why you crashed." She turned to him, and for a moment he thought she might be angry, but then she laughed. A real, full laugh. Jonah blinked, caught off guard. He hadn't heard her laugh like that before. It was light and alive and full of something new. "You joke," she said, shaking her head. "I do." Jonah replied, smirking. Sometimes there was a pause. Then Selah's voice dropped to a softer tone. "I didn't think I would live." "Jonah," she whispered, "I was ready to die in that wreck. When I saw you, I thought you were going to finish me." He didn't reply right away. The wind moved across the rocks below, making small whispering sounds. "I've seen a lot of broken things," he finally said. "Machines, ships, people, most of the time. Nobody wants to fix them, but I do." Selah reached out and placed her hand over his. Her touch was cool, metal but steady. "I see that now," she said. He looked down at their hands, then slowly turned his over and held hers. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. In that quiet moment, she didn't feel alien. She felt close. Her people had called humans weak, selfish, primitive, but Jonah had given her warmth, limbs, and a reason to stand again. And in return, she had given him something to trust. She didn't know what it meant yet, didn't know what name to give it, but she knew one thing for certain. She didn't want to leave. Not yet. Not now. Not when sitting beside a human made the stars feel this bright. The sky was still dark when Jonah woke to the sound of static crackling on the comms panel. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, the cot groaning under his weight. The room was cold, lit only by the dim glow of a half-charged power core. The signal was faint, but real. He leaned closer, adjusted the frequency, and listened. A voice came through. He couldn't understand the words. But the tone chilled him, sharp, clipped, and cold. This wasn't a distress call or a warning. It was a plan being executed. He recorded the signal and pulled up the nearby radar feed. A ship was entering the moon's atmosphere, flying low to avoid detection. Bigger than the last one, faster, and likely armed. They were coming back, and this time, they weren't sending scouts, they were sending killers. Jonah shut the panel and stood up. Pulling on his jacket, he walked into the main bay where Selah was still asleep. She had powered down her limbs for the night, resting in silence with her head tilted to one side. For a moment, he just stood there, watching her. She looked peaceful, calm. Nothing like the fighter who'd helped him disable a kill team. Nothing. Like the alien who had screamed in fear when he first found her, she looked almost human. He didn't want to wake her, but he had no choice. He gently touched her shoulder, her eyes opened fast, alert at once. She looked at him, then noticed the tension in his face. Her voice was quiet, but firm. "They're coming." Jonah nodded, landed less than 100 clicks from here. He said, "They'll be here in hours, maybe less." Selah sat up, reattached her limbs in seconds, and stood. There was no fear in her eyes this time. "Only fire. Then we fight," she said. They didn't have a proper army, just scrap tools, old bots. A few stun grenades, and whatever they could weld into weapons, but they worked fast. Jonah rigged the drone to patrol the ridge, connected. It too motion sensors. Selah built traps out of magnetic plates and tripwire. They even rewired one of the service bots to deliver small shocks on command. Not perfect, but enough to stall someone. At noon, the wind shifted, dust blew sideways. Instead of forward, and in the distance, the sound of something heavy moving across stone echoed faintly. Jonah climbed to the roof and spotted the approaching ship. It hovered just above the ground, scanning, slow and careful. 3 shadows moved ahead of it, figures in black armor with glowing visors. Selah stood at the front of the outpost. She didn't hide, didn't flinch. Her shoulders were back, her head high. She looked like a soldier. But she had never been trained to fight. All she had now was instinct and pain. And a human who refused to let her be taken. The attackers came close, one raising a scanner toward the outpost. Then the ground beneath him exploded. The trap activated. Throwing him backward in a blast of red sand, the others ducked. Weapons ready, Jonah fired from the roof. Plasma bolts streaking past their cover. One attacker rolled, trying to flank him. But Selah was already moving. She charged forward, legs powered by the full force of human engineering. Her arm locked into a welding blade, sparking blue. She struck the ground near the second attacker, forcing him back. They fought hand to hand. Her movements, sharp, mechanical, brutal. She didn't fight like a soldier. She fought like someone with nothing left to lose. Jonah jumped down as the final attacker aimed for Selah's back. He landed hard, plasma cutter in hand. One hit, and the weapon short-circuited, sending sparks into the air. Together, they drove the last one down. Weapons smoking, hearts pounding. It was over in minutes. Fast, loud, violent, and final. They stood in silence as the ship powered down. Jonah limped forward and ripped the main core from the engine bay. "Now they can't call for help," he muttered. Breathing hard, Selah sat on a broken rock, hands shaking. Jonah dropped beside her, his face smudged with smoke and dirt. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. You? He smiled, winced, and said, I'll survive. Then she leaned into him, just a little, her head resting against his shoulder. It wasn't planned, it wasn't spoken, but it felt right to broken people. Sitting together, watching the dust settle, she closed her eyes and whispered, Thank you for standing with me. He didn't answer right away. He just placed a hand over hers, held it tight, and whispered back, You never had to stand alone. The outpost was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. Not the kind that comes from loneliness, but the kind that follows survival. Jonah sat near the open hatch, legs stretched out, eyes half closed as he watched the sky turn from red to soft violet. The cleanup had taken hours. The enemy ship had been stripped for parts, their armor buried deep beneath the rocks. No signals, no movement, no more threats. For now, they were safe. Sayla stood inside, adjusting the fine joints in her mechanical fingers. Her body ached from the fight. Even if most of her pain receptors were no longer natural, she flexed her new limbs, tested her balance, and walked without a sound. Not long ago, she couldn't move at all. Now, she could run, fight, build, and survive. Because of him, she stepped out into the light, standing beside Jonah without speaking. He looked up at her, then nodded slightly. Signals still clean. He said, No more ships. She asked, None, but we both know that won't last. Sayla sat beside him, her gaze distant. My people will come eventually, she said, but not to save me. They'll want answers. Or to erase the mess. Jonah reached into his jacket and pulled out a small drive. I backed up your data, he said. Everything you recovered from the crash, the transmission logs, the kill order. She stared at the drive for a long moment. That's dangerous, she whispered. So is telling the truth, he replied. She didn't take the drive, not yet. Instead, she looked at him closely. Her voice softened. Why did you save all this? Jonah didn't answer at first. He looked down at the ground, ran a hand through his messy hair, then said, I think your voice matters. You came here to share something important, and they tried to silence you. I couldn't let that be the end. She reached over and slowly took the drive, her fingers closing around it. She didn't say thank you. He didn't expect her to. But the way she looked at him, the way her eyes softened, it said enough for the next few days. They worked side by side, rebuilding the outpost. They added new defenses, powered up the radar array, and expanded the storage units. Sayla designed new systems for communication and power. Jonah welded the framework, ran the wires, and made sure it all held together. They didn't talk much during the day, but at night, they would sit on the roof, watching the stars move across the sky one evening, while the sky shimmered with auroras. A soft ping echoed from the main console. Sayla walked over, checked the signal, and froze. The symbol on the screen was hers, her people. A direct message, encrypted, clean. Jonah stood behind her as she read it. They want me to return, she said quietly. Promise safe passage. No punishment, no war. He stayed silent, waiting. Sayla turned around slowly. But I don't know if they mean it. You don't have to go, Jonah said gently. You've already made it through more than most ever could. Sayla walked to the open hatch, looked out at the wasteland, then at the outpost, then at him. This place, she said, was never home, but now it feels like one. Jonah leaned against the frame and crossed his arms. So, what will you do? She smiled, small and sure. I'll answer the message. But I won't go back alone. He raised an eyebrow. What are you saying? I want to build something here, she said. A station, a bridge. A way forward, not just for them, not just for me, but for anyone who's broken, lost, or hunted. Just like I was. Jonah looked at her, then smiled, slow and steady. Then I guess we better get started. And so they did, piece by piece. day by day. A new signal tower rose from the dust. A place that was once silent began to speak. Not in weapons, not in fear, but in light, in movement, in shared creation. The alien girl who had crashed with no arms or legs now walked freely through the canyon. And beside her, the human who had never meant to be a hero. Together, they built a new future, not for war, not for power, but for peace, because in a cold, violent galaxy, sometimes all it takes is one broken girl and one stubborn mechanic to remind everyone what it means to be alive.